Hamas does not lack food or education. They thrive in situations of asymmetric war. This is what gives them power in spite of the boom of information and free rights. We trust that they won't change because their incentives aren't changed, because there are still that religious group that is being funded by other religious superpowers trying to force into getting absolute control over this area. We explained two things in our extension. Why? One, why Hamas is more likely to stay in power and like escalation, which later then establishes all the damages that we get from OO. Secondly, why there is some sort of an alternative, why the status quo on the long term kind of solves itself, which minimizes completely first government's case in saying that we are just creating dead babies and no place in the world. Before I'll get into the two clashes, which are going to be how will Gaza look without the siege? And secondly, where will there be more change in Gaza itself? I want to give one external rebuttal about the whole idea of businesses. We're saying several things. One, there are already kinds of factories. What they build are things for the war, things that Hamas allows them to do. More funds aren't necessary because they already have money, they already have products, they already receive those kind of things. The problem is, how are they being distributed within Gaza Strip? We don't see why there's going to be specific change, especially when we see, especially when we see Hamas still in control. And what they're saying is that their main problem, that is very mitigated, is there are some delays in the buying and the selling of everything. We're saying that is super small. We don't see a huge bloom of businesses coming, especially if we're under the same role. What we're saying is, at least with the siege, when you are giving money, when you're donating money, when you're donating products, there's some trust that some of it actually makes it to get into the population, the people that you intend to do it, and not all of it into the war effort of Hamas. So at the very least, we're supporting getting some of the resources for the people. And that sort of has the same level of analysis in the mitigation of extra resources. No, thank you. Let's move to the two areas of clash. First one is how will Gaza look without the siege. And the first government basically says, listen, we want more relief and we want more negotiation. But here's what we're saying. Hamas is very, very likely to stay in power for several reasons. One, because they thrive on religious propaganda. They can hear it everywhere in the mosques. This is a religious group. They get all the money from Qatar and other areas. They're going to be in the vacuum of power the moment someone is going to leave. They already hold all the weapon. What Mai says is that it's not just going to be a fight between Fatah and Hamas. Hamas is very, very likely to stay. What we add here is that Hamas isn't likely to change its incentives. They don't want a strong Gaza. If they wanted, they would have used it already with the resources. They want to remain in power. The way to remain in power, as they know, is to continue with the disproportionate, where resources are going to be. No, thank you. So, how does that help us? Well, it actually allows the analysis of OO to come to life, because OO says, listen, if Hamas is staying, if Hamas isn't a partner that we can talk to, then we have the fear. Then they want to initiate war. What we're saying is very likely for them to stay, and there's not going to be any optimistic change according to the entire bench of government. We don't see why any other actor is going to be there. We don't see any analysis why Hamas is going to change its incentive. All we're seeing is that we are strengthening Hamas mechanism. We are allowing them to use terror because it has proven to be successful in getting their goals. Yes, first.
Hamas uses the daily desperation of the citizens of Gaza as the most effective means to line up the population into an armed and uncompromising struggle. When they suffer more, they support more the violence.
We understand. We don't see why there's going to be such a huge change in the situation of small Gaza. I don't know, when Hamas is still in control, when they're still trying to have power, when they're still investing most of their resources into the war effort, when they're still the strongest, when they still hold guns, we don't see any mechanism. And this is why we actually contribute into this debate, because we show you why it is more likely to lead into a world where an additional war or round or something might be, or at the very least not improving their situation. Let's move to the second one. And the second one is, is there going to be more change? And in here we said that the problem is Gaza, not the resources. The wealth exists. The question is, how are we going to change it? And what Mai started saying is super important, because today there are already changes in the world. The reason why Israel was capable to have peace treaties with Egypt and with Jordan is because there were more international support in here, and no one was supporting a specific mechanism of war of Egypt, etc., etc., because they lost. They got them into a point where they couldn't have won. What happens today with Trump's 100 whatever supreme power and everything is that there is change in the Arab world, which touches the Islamic and the religious arguments that Hamas brings. Yes, second.
The reason why people quarrel with Hamas right now, because they fight for the basic liberation, the basic ability to have a life in Gaza. When they have the life in Gaza, they no longer support Hamas, and Hamas will have to change.
Or that the way they perceive life is mostly religious fanaticism. Why do we know that? Because anyone who's a bit more educated and have a chance to leave, leaves Gaza. They don't want to stay. They don't want to stay here. The reason why they're staying here is either because they can, the war is hard, etc., or because they actually believe in the war effort and in the frustration, etc., etc. It doesn't going to change. Here's the thing. Most of first house government says that in the status quo we have dead babies, but that's not true. And that's the direct answer for them. Because in the long run of the status quo, the more you undermine Hamas, the more you show that their techniques aren't working. And at the same time you cover alternatives using Saudi Arabia, using Bahrain, using Kuwait, using Omar and Egypt, etc., etc., which are things that we actually do today. It is more likely to change Hamas and still maintain security at the highest situation. So what we gave you, we are the only one who showed you that there is an alternative to the situation currently happening right there in the long run. At the very least, you have to change your analysis between those two. It's not either dead babies everywhere or not. It's either taking the risk and working with other superpowers, or opening it up and giving another win for Hamas.